So now it's Germany's move, right? Because we've done all these deals with the Allies, and it's an economic declaration of war, so now Germany has to make the next move in order to provoke us, basically. Well, they did it. And so the Robin Moore, which was a U.S. ship, was torpedoed by the Germans outside of the war zone. And FDR basically says, all right, gloves are off, that's it. Now we're doing everything we can to help the Allies, but we're not going into the war yet. So here's how the timeline's going to work. By June of 1940, we know that France falls and the Vichy government is in place. In June of 1941, a year later, Germany invades the Soviet Union. He breaks the deal with Stalin, and he invades the Soviet Union. Now, Hitler was hoping it would only take a few weeks to roll into the USSR and knock him out. Well, what he didn't count on was the Russian winter, the same as Napoleon. Okay, Russian winter beats Napoleon. Russian winter is going to beat the Germans. So it takes him a lot longer to roll into the USSR and take over the way he had planned. He thought it would be a quick hit, right? So what he didn't realize was the USSR is huge geographically, and it's been Russian policy for centuries. If they're invaded, all they do is burn what's useful to the invading country, and they just roll back. So they trade land for time. So they have time on their side, and they just give up the land they need to as the invading country comes in, and they just push back and push back and push back. Okay, retreat, 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 and burn what could be used by the opposing country. Well, if they do that long enough, they're going to get to the winter months, which winter months in the Soviet Union are like, I don't know, 8 months, 9 months out of the year. So, and it gets bloody cold. So the Germans weren't prepared for winter. They didn't bring the right supplies. They didn't bring enough food. They didn't have the right equipment to get them through the winter months. So they wind up freezing to death. And they have to withdraw before they are successful. Now, the Atlantic Conference. With Stalin on the brink of falling to the Nazis, it's essential that FDR have a play in this war at this point. So in August of 1941, notice where we are here. We're in the late summer before we wind up at war. Okay, so August of 1941, FDR and Woodrow Wilson are going to get together. They're going to meet on a battleship in the Atlantic, and they're going to make an agreement on how the world should be set up after the war. So it's basically like Wilson's 14 points, except that these were more concise, okay? And they were created by England and the United States, and not just the United States. So there was a certain advantage there to having collaboration going on. So there are going to be 8 points, and they're going to be some of the same that Wilson had talked about: reduction in arms, self-determination for countries, the enforcing democracies, that sort of thing. The right for people to decide their own political fate. So these were hopes for post-war democracies. One of those points, establishing a new League of Nations. That the League of Nations isn't working, and frankly the United States is not a member, so it's failing right there. We need to create a new body that would take the place of the League of Nations. That would become the United Nations after the war. So those plans are already in the making. Hitler brings out his U-boats. Now he's basically sick of the United States. So the United States had agreed to convoy munitions, arms, from the United States to Iceland for Great Britain to pick up there and then take on to Great Britain. Well, that's great, except that Germany is wise to the plan, and they decide to get involved and start taking out some of our ships. So they go after the USS Greer first. They attack the vessel, but they aren't able to sink it. So the Greer gets away with very little damage on this one, but does take out the German U-boat. Nice, huh? So at this point, FDR says, all right, that's it. You shoot on sight. If you see a German U-boat and that's where you're going, shoot them. Don't waste any time. Don't take any chances. Shoot on sight policy for the United States. Germany's going to come after the USS Kearney, hits it with a torpedo, kills about 11 people, but doesn't sink the ship. Goes after the USS Reuben James, does sink that ship, kills about 100 of our men. FDR is ticked at this point. He's had it. So by November of 1941, we're a month away, we're going to revoke the Neutrality Acts. We're done. Shoot on sight, shoot wherever you want. Now we're sailing not just to Iceland, we're going to sail all the way to Great Britain, and U.S. merchant ships are allowed to carry arms and shoot if they need to on a German U-boat. And here we go. This is it. So Pearl Harbor. Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. We know that. That should be almost, I think we should know that when we're born. What happens is that late in 1940, a year before, the U.S. embargo on Japan really gets very restrictive, and Japan can no longer get steel, oil, gas, nothing, okay? So they're really inhibited in their war efforts against China because of the U.S. embargo. We're also going to freeze their assets. Anything they had invested here in our stock market, in our banks, and real estate, whatever, we freeze all of that. So they can't even get money that they had invested here because we're not going to let them have it. We're going to inhibit their war efforts with everything we've got. Well, they're really ticked off. So we knew in 1941, FDR, they had broken the code of the Japanese, their secret code. And we knew in 1941 that they were going to declare war on us, that they were coming after us. We knew they were going to attack one of our bases in the Pacific. We thought it would be British Malay or the Philippines. Didn't happen though, did it? They decided to go thousands of miles away and go to this little place called Hawaii. 5 islands, you know, a major naval base, a major marine base. So they come after Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands, on the island of Oahu, right outside of Honolulu. They expected to find all of our battleships and aircraft carriers there because they were all scheduled to be there. Fortunately for us, we had sent the aircraft carrier group out to sea a couple of days before, so they were nowhere around. It was the battleships, however, that really got damaged in this one. Their planes fly overhead, they drop all kinds of torpedoes and everything else into the harbor. We didn't have, and the harbor at Pearl Harbor is so small that you can't maneuver multiple ships in there at a time. So the ships were sitting ducks. We were able to turn some of our guns on the Japanese bombers, but not many. We were able to get a few planes up in the air and go after them, but not many because they were smart. And they didn't necessarily take out our aircraft. They took out a lot of our aircraft, but they took out the runways that we needed to get the aircraft up in the air. They knew if they bombed our runways that we couldn't get the planes up. So they went after those first. How smart of them. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not FDR knew this attack was coming or not, and whether he let it happen because he wanted an excuse to get us into the war. I don't think he needed this excuse to get us in. We were basically in at this point. So there were 3,000 casualties on that day. It was a really devastating day. It's the worst attack on American soil by a foreign country to this point. And it was a total surprise. So, for most people. December 8th, we declare war against Japan. FDR goes to the floor of Congress and he says it's a date which will live in infamy and we don't have a choice. We have to go to war. We've been provoked now. December 11th, Germany and Italy are going to declare war against us. So now the game is afoot. Okay, we're in. Roll on.